All right, well, it's been a while since I've made any kind of video discussing Destiny, and if you've watched this channel before, I used to have a pretty wide selection of content stretching back pretty much all the way till, vanilla Destiny 2. But as of late, I've decided to really not make any videos on Destiny. I'm not playing it a whole lot. There's nothing really crazy happening in the game all that much. But as of late, there has been a lot of discussion that has started, and a lot of that discussion is comparing Destiny 1 versus Destiny 2. There are a lot of content creators that are looking and dissecting both games a little bit more analytically to see why one game feels better than the other, despite one of them being made, over 12 years ago and not being supported as of 13 years ago. So today I kind of want to put my 2 cents in and speak to some of the things I'm seeing discussed. And I'm thinking as a decision, I'll go ahead and, unmark a lot of the videos that I had taken off the channel initially, just because there is so much discussion going on. Maybe somebody sees value in them, maybe they don't. But essentially, to break down what's happening, if you have been living under a rock, there have been a lot of content creators who have been going back and experiencing Destiny 1, who have been isolating themselves from Destiny 2, and the status of Destiny 2 is pretty poor. We were supposed to get a mid expansion update in May. We've obviously not gotten that. We're not going to be getting that. We were supposed to be getting the kind of next big one in June, but we're not getting anything at all in June. We were supposed to be getting like the next mid expansion that they were going to be releasing twice a year. Bungie recently had Marathon come out. Most of their cards are probably in that, which is understandable. But there's not a whole lot of communication coming around about Destiny, which is where their core audience for the last 12 years has been. And it's pretty pathetic, if you ask me, to see what's happening and not get a whole lot of communication. But essentially, a lot of the content creators and videos I've been seeing and watching have been criticizing Destiny 2 and comparing it to Destiny 1 for issues with longevity, the replayability factor, the core loop in both games, as well as the usage of content or the lack of usage of that content. Now, to give you some backstory and recent experience from myself, I had over 5,000 hours in Destiny 2 by the time Final Shape launched. I probably had anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 in Destiny 1. And during the Edge of Fate, probably the whole year of the Edge of Fate, I would say, I played maybe 100 hours, maybe just under 100 hours. For the Renegades mid-size expansion, less than 30. I beat the main campaign, I grinded to get the lightsaber, do a little bit of power leveling, and that was it. Less than 30 in Renegades since then. Now, I did actually go back a couple months ago and do what a lot of content creators are doing, where they're creating a fresh Destiny 1 character, and they're also maybe doing a fresh Destiny 2 character, and they're looking and comparing the early game and really just breaking the game down to its bare bone introductions when you don't have any of the crazy legendaries and exotics, and you don't have any of the crazy skills and stuff leveled up, just to see what the early game experience is and try to isolate and find out what was it about Destiny 1 that made it so good. Was it nostalgia? Was it those rose-tinted glasses looking back at what we had, or was it actually better? And in a lot of respects, and I think a lot of people are realizing this, Destiny 1 just was better in a lot of different ways. For starters, the gameplay and the expectation on the player to perform and actually play the game was completely different. Destiny 1 was harder. Destiny 1, because of its difficulty, and keep in mind, Destiny had one difficulty when you started playing the game, story mode. The opening mission of Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 are night and day differences when it comes to difficulty. In Destiny 2, I created a new character. The very first Fallen Vandal that you engage with, it would take around 2 minutes of it shooting you directly in the chest before your shields broke and you would be at risk of dying. In Destiny 1, the exact same mission, the exact same criteria, just in a different game, that same enemy will kill you in maybe 5 seconds if you just stand there and let him shoot you. So there's an immediate shift in the expectation on the player on you need to be good, you need to have some semblance of danger, you need to be moving in and out of cover, you need to kill enemies quickly. Immediately, one of the first things I noticed was just a difference on the expectation of the player by Bungie. Now, Destiny 2, and this is something that I've, I guess, not really thought of, is it is a free-to-play game. And when you think of a lot of other free-to-play games out there, they usually have that same track record of getting the player in early, not making anything really difficult. As a matter of fact, making everything seem super easy to make the players seem like they're really good and feel really good about it. And the game doesn't really get hard or start getting complex until you start putting a couple hours into it. And then you start getting asked for your wallet and your credit card. And Bungie actually pretty much did the same thing to Destiny. I think that it changing from free to play or from paid to free to play in Shadowkeep, I don't think it was this in your face about it and for many, many years. But if you play Destiny 2 now, you're going to be asked for season passes. You're going to be asked for expansions. You're going to be asked for content passes. You're going to be asked for dungeon keys. You're going to be asked for all kinds of things to access different subclasses. It actually is a free to play game where the early is easy, and if you are somebody who is mid maxed, you're either just leftovers from when D2 kind of wasn't like that, or you have bought everything, you've been playing pretty religiously, and you've gotten the good gear. I'm not saying Destiny 2 is free to play, but I am saying that it definitely has shifted more towards a free to play kind of gotcha, easy to get game where you get in, everything's easy. There's no real depth to the game unless you dig super deep, and then there's really still not depth even there. But back to Destiny 1 versus Destiny 2. Early game Destiny, legendary weapons, the purple weapons that pretty much make up everybody's build today in Destiny 2. Legendaries were scarce in Destiny 1. You had to grind to find the good ones, or you had to grind for, Vanguard tokens or Crucible tokens to get good ones from vendors in D1. And it was just a rare thing to actually get one to drop in the open world. Really, raids were probably the best source of them. Even running Nightfalls and stuff in Destiny 1 and hard Nightfalls, you're going to be getting blues a lot. You may get legendaries. Talking about exotics. Exotics in Destiny 1 were giga rare. And because of their rarity, it almost made, that exotic perk about them, even better. If everybody has an exotic, one, it's not exotic, and its strength is just kind of now the new normal. So I think Destiny 1 exotics were just handled a lot better. And then we'll switch to Destiny 2 early game. So again, I made that whole spiel about Destiny 2 feeling like free-to-play just rubbish in general. Enemies pose little risk to the player early on. Again, the very first opening mission, you do a side-by-side comparison. One enemy nearly one-shots you. The other would take about 2 minutes of shooting you straight in the chest from a moderate distance before you actually have risk of dying. The first hour of gameplay of a new Destiny 2 character, you're given legendaries from the Shah-Hine quest. You're given exotics from the reward pass or from the Shah-Hine quests as well, or the season pass. Immediately, the whole rarity system in Destiny is circumvented, I guess, as a means to get players cooler stuff quicker, but there's just a whole lack of loot progression of grinding towards better greens and better blues, and then eventually getting legendaries, and then eventually finding exotics once you've played enough and to some degree earned them by playing enough to get them, or just become extremely rare or extremely lucky. The whole rarity system and loot system in Destiny 2 is just messed up from the beginning. And again, I don't really know. I think this was a problem back even when D2 started. I think when D2 started, they had a shift in philosophy where kind of everybody deserved to get anything, even if you didn't necessarily do something to get that. I remember Vanilla Destiny 2, there was a vendor in the tower that you could buy raid gear from. I think you had to have currency from the raid, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe there was a different way to get currencies, but a player could, in theory, have an entire raid set of gear from only running a small part of the raid, or maybe not even running the raid at all. I think there was a way to get gear without actually running it. So I think that just some very pitiful philosophy shifts about getting gear and making the best gear in the game accessible to every player, no matter their skill level, was just an awful way to treat a looter shooter, and especially one with competitive PvP and super competitive and meant to be super competitive PvE encounters. It was just a philosophy shift that was very, very bad for the health of the game and that loot progression system. And even though there are not necessarily ways to get raid gear outside of raids anymore, there is definitely still a whole feeling of Bungie pushing legendaries and exotics onto the player, I guess, as a means to get dopamine hits. But again, it's kind of encroaching on that free-to-play gotcha garbage, where that's what those companies use to keep players playing. But in Destiny, the whole looter shooter aspect is just not there anymore because of how you do kind of get these legendaries and exotics, fed to you in a way that just feels like, at least to me, feels like I didn't earn them. Feels like just running content means I get legendaries. Running content means I sometimes get exotics. In Destiny, I never ran content expecting to get either of them. And that was just an awesome moment when I did. Now, another thing that some people have been pretty much attributing to the death of Destiny 2, I guess, or, whatever status it's in, how it got here, is the portal. And the portal is something that I probably differ than a lot of people on because, first off, I think, Portal was Bungie trying to introduce some kind of system that had the sticking power and introduced that replayability feeling that Destiny 1 had when it came to grinding strikes or grinding PvP. I think the portal was an attempt to just get players in and get them in that core loop quicker. I think that's what it was trying to achieve. And I think Bungie was trying to do a few different things with it, or too many things with it at once, because they attached the power grind to the portal. Now, here's the thing. I'll straight up tell you, I love games with power grind, even though it's an arbitrary number. For a lot of years, Destiny hasn't had a loot grind because of the legendary and exotic problem I talked about. So at least with the power grind, me getting, weapons and armor that have a higher power level meant that I could do more damage, take more damage, and do harder content. So for players like me, I liked that they were introducing a power grind into the game. But the problem, I think, was that the portal was really sucking all of the life from the game, from the open world patrols, from doing, bounties and stuff in the open world, from doing different pieces of content, from running the same strike over and over again to get some kind of loot. I think that the portal changed the way that Bungie wants you to interact with the game on a daily basis, and it kind of backfired because people didn't like that. They liked the idea of going out into the open world and experiencing what had been built, doing patrols, doing the lost sectors, doing public events, and a lot of that just feeling of the game being a world that you live in and you breathe in and you can go do different things in was kind of killed when the portal was where they were forced to go. And I think what Bungie should have done is they should have had all of the loot and the cool drop systems that I do think the portal had. They should have just sprinkled that across all of the game. There should have been little markers on the open world patrol zones. When you do lost sectors, you have extra loot, or when you do public events here, you got extra loot, or maybe on this destination for a given day, there was a higher chance of getting certain types of weapons. I think that the portal introduced some things that the game could definitely take advantage of, but all of it being in the portal was the problem. To grind power level efficiently, which I know a lot of people don't like to do, you had to do it in portal. I think that the power level journey, that whole system of grinding power level, probably would have been taken a little bit better if you didn't force players to do it all in the portal. If the activities they wanted to run weren't in the portal, they had to do stuff they didn't want to, just to get that number to go up. I think if you would have had the power level, the chase for gear, the drop systems they've added into the portal, if all of that would have been just kind of spread out across the game, across the destinations, across the playlists that we already had, and been in the portal simultaneously, I think it would have been received much, much better, because the portal was pulling all the life out of the game. It was introducing many systems that I personally do like to have in the game, but I think that the portal, again, in order to introduce and engage with these new systems, the power progression, the tiered loot, you pretty much only could do it in Portal. You couldn't do it in any of the other nodes or destinations or things we talked about. So the Portal, in my opinion, it did lead to the pathway now where the game is kind of dead, but I don't think that it at its core was the problem. I think that all of the cool systems, like the power progression, like the loot drops from different activities that you can see in the portal, I think that should have been put everywhere in the game, and the portal should have just been there as an option. Like, hey, if you don't want to look around on the map for something to do, if you don't want to look around and have to do that, you just want to get in, press a button, and start playing, the portal is here for you. If you're the other kind of person who likes to grind different things in the open world and likes to have that more social aspect of Destiny, here's the open world navigation screen for you. I think that's how it should have been implemented, but because of the way they decided to implement it, it just completely nuked the game. It nuked any hope of the portal being a good thing for the game, kind of like sunsetting, but I'm not even going to talk about sunsetting right now. Now, another thing, this is kind of similar to the new systems and stuff they added in Edge of Fate with Portal, is the tiered weapons don't work after the Edge of Fate. And this is kind of tied to the power progression decision and Bungie's lack of having a spine, if you ask me, on taking a stand. So the way that it was going to work is that tiered weapons, tier 5s, these would be something that you would very rarely see. You would be very, very hard to get them. They almost, for the first month after Edge of Fate came out, were kind of like Destiny 1 exotics. You did not see them. If you saw one, you were extremely lucky. And I think they actually had some good power behind them to make them, worth that kind of allure of being a T5. And the expectation was that once this season was over, everybody's power level would be brought back to a starting point, and all of the content and activity, the new content and activities that could drop new weapons, new gear at that new T4, T5 status, you would have to regrind again to get back up to that point to earn them. And again, I think that if Bungie had spread the power grind across all aspects of the game, Strike playlist, Crucible playlist, not just had it in Portal, been in the open world, been in Gambit, if the power progression was in all aspects of the game, I think that they would have been able to keep it a little bit longer. But instead, because of how negatively received the Portal was, because of how negatively received the power grind was, again, I think it was received badly because it was tied to Portal, Bungie, literally, I think a month and a half or 2 months after Edge of Fate came out, said, you know what? That whole year we've been talking to you guys about Portal, about the power grind being back in Destiny, about that progression being back in Destiny. We're not going to do it anymore. No more resets. Let me explain to you what that did. For players like me, who reached the point where they could get T5 gear in Edge of Fate, day one Renegades, I was getting T5s. The T5s of the new weapons and armor that we were meant to grind potentially weeks and months to get, kind of like how we had to do in Renegades, was immediately given to me. So we've instantly killed that progression loop of grinding my character to get stronger, even though it's through an arbitrary system you may not like. That system of getting to the point where I can run the hard content and do the things I need to do to have a chance to get these T5s, instantly gone. And there was nothing there to substitute it. Just day one, I was getting T5s. So that's why the Renegades expansion has a third of the playtime as Edge of Fate, because day one I was getting the things that in Edge of Fate it took me a couple weeks to get. And that for me killed the Edge of Fate, the kind of content grind loop that Bungie had been trying to build. And again, I personally wish they would have just left the power grind in the game. They would have spread the ways to level your power up across all aspects of the game. So really, no matter where you were going or what you were doing, you could make progress towards improving your character. And I just think it would have been received better. But again, because of the poor implementation of it, because of the decision, in my opinion, the rash decision just to say, okay, you don't like it, we're not going to do it anymore. And that just completely killed that loot grind, that progression journey that would have been there with Renegades. And again, problem with me. Now, this is kind of recent year and a half, last 2 years of Destiny. Let's talk about the years past. One of the biggest problems that most people will attribute to Destiny 2 in its current state is the Destiny Content Vault, introduced with Beyond Light. Essentially, many chunks of the game that were from year 1 and year 2 of Destiny 2, we were told that was just bloating the game. From a system standpoint, from an engine standpoint, it was not feasible for them to keep making new content while having these old activities with these old systems and an old architecture in the game simultaneously. So they got rid of it. We were told it was going into a content vault where they could repurpose it, rebuild it, and then bring it out again. But we've not really seen any meaningful reintroduction into the game since it was introduced. There have been some activities and some content that did go in there that periodically we get introduced to again, but if you want me to be honest, I expected the DCV to be kind of a staging sandbox for the Bungie team to rebuild these old activities, rebuild these destinations, rebuild maybe even the campaigns that were sent there, and then they would eventually reintroduce them and make them permanent additions to the game. That is not the case. In year one, the Red War, the Forsaken campaign, I don't even know what else is in there, if there is anything else big and chunky in there, but those two expansions and campaigns I just named are responsible for most of the onboarding and the good onboarding and good introduction to Destiny that players need. But instead, they're getting expansions and campaigns that are 3, 4, 5, 6 years into the game, where introducing players to this world is not the priority. Furthering the story is the priority. And it just makes a pretty pitiful new onboarding process for new players. And this has been a problem for a long time. The content that is in the game now, because there is a lot of content in Destiny, it does not have a content problem. It has a content reusing problem, lack of reusing the content in an effective way. You think of other games out there that reuse content effectively, I would attribute Borderlands, I would attribute Diablo, I would attribute Path of Exile, I would attribute The Division, Division 2. These games oftentimes make a singular piece of content and they iterate that piece of content 50 different ways in variations that make it somewhat interesting sometimes, maybe not all the time, but at least reuses that content to make a core part of the game and continue to build on it. Destiny, to me, a lot of that content that's good that they could iterate on again is just not seen. It's never used. The game feels as wide as an ocean as far as there being all kinds of content that is in the game now, but it's 1 foot deep. There's no depth. Once you find a piece of content you like, you do it 2 or 3 times, and really you've experienced it, all of its caveats. There's not going to be any times where you're going to experience it again with a new coat of paint. Bungie honestly used to reuse content a little bit better and effectively, and I have to tell you, probably one of the coolest content reuses that they have had in a very long time was, I don't believe it was the last Guardian games, but maybe last year's Guardian games. So they introduced an activity where it essentially threw you into a playlist where you would randomly queue into old boss encounters from like all of the seasons and expansions that were in the DCV. I remember fighting like the Nightmare of Gaul, I think, that was in the season of The Haunted, just the Nightmare version of him. I remember it throwing me into random encounters that were in the campaign missions for the Final Shape. That was a cool activity. I can't remember the name of it, but that to me was a bright light that said, okay, there's all this content, there's all these expansions, there's all these seasons of many activities and story missions that they could just throw into a playlist to do a boss fight or an encounter, and it would be really cool. And that, like I said, that one activity was something I really wish Bungie would have leaned more into and add new encounters to it, rotate it, modifiers, all that stuff, but they didn't. And this is a problem I think the game has now, where it's as wide as an ocean, but there's no content depth. And yeah, it's just a pretty bad problem with the DCV. I really hope the next game they build for Destiny, if there is ever going to be a new Destiny, is made with longevity, with being played year after year after year, because it's apparent that Destiny 2 was not built for that. And it's probably a good reason why the game is in such a sad state today. A lack of investment on the Strike playlists, pretty much no investment on the Gambit playlist, mediocre at best PvP playlist investment. I feel like we've got more this week at Bungie's and big updates, seasonal updates, and even expansion updates that have happened to PvP that have been more about modes, about matchmaking, about some small weapon or armor introductions. I feel like a time where we get a bunch of new Destiny PvP maps has probably not been the case, maybe even since like Forsaken. And here's the thing, I'm not a big PvP player, so I don't even know how many maps we got in Forsaken, but I can tell you that the expansions and the additions we got in Destiny 1, it felt like every time we got maps, there was 3, 4, 5 of them. And I don't know of a time in Destiny 2's history where we've ever had that many PvP maps added all at once as part of a content drop. It's just, in my opinion, it's pitiful, because PvP is probably one of the cruxes of the game that keeps people playing. Same for strikes. I love doing strikes. That to me is kind of one of those core loop part of the games that I wish would get a lot more investment. Part of that investment is, I think, making the existing strikes interesting, refreshing them, but we definitely need new ones. There's no reason that an expansion shouldn't have 4 or 5 strikes in them. And Destiny 1 also does strikes better because whenever the first expansion came out, all of the strikes in the game got this new enemy faction, the Taken, added. They got their objectives refreshed, the boss fights refreshed. And in the last expansion for Destiny 2, The Rise of Iron, we got the Siva playlist where all of the existing strikes had Siva enemies, had Siva infected bosses. And anytime you queue up for strikes in Destiny 1, you can get one of these 3 variations of every strike in the game. So again, there's depth to the strike playlist in a game that's 12 years old that Destiny 2 does not have, and it's 10 years old, almost 10 years old. And it's just, again, it's a problem that I don't understand how Bungie has missed. I don't know where all their time and effort has been spent in putting things into Destiny for the last few years. If you want me to be honest, I think all of their cards have been on Marathon, and I don't know where the development in Destiny has gone for the last few years, because even the Portal and some of these other additions are, they're mediocre, and they didn't do what they set out to do very well. So again, it begs the question, who made the decisions to not invest in these core parts of the game that people love to play and instead focus on other endeavors that seemingly had no player engagement or ability to hold players' attention? Yeah, that's kind of my spiel as far as kind of what's happening in Destiny. I think that the Destiny 2's problem right now is really just not a problem that's going to be solved with another mid-size expansion. I think that the hope on the horizon for the June update, whatever it's going to be, we're hoping for a new Pantheon style content. And right there, Pantheon is one of the good additions they've had in the last 5 years because it reuses pieces of content that we've not seen in a long time, and it reuses them in an interesting and difficult and engaging way. There should be Pantheon style content every season, every few months for Destiny that refreshes all the different seasons and content we've got in the game. Like, for Destiny to succeed in the day and age where there's all kinds of competition for looter shooters and action RPGs that refresh and give us meaningful updates and expansions every 3 to 4 months, this is not a time for Destiny to be saying, hey, we're going to give you one update every 6 months and that update's going to be kind of eh. Destiny needs to lock in every 3 to 4 months. We should be getting new playlists with refreshed activities, pull 10 things from the content vault every season, give it all kinds of fresh coats of paint, give it new modifiers, mix up the objectives, give it to us every season and say, hey, here's a whole bunch of stuff we've taken, updated it, added cool new weapons, added cool new armor, new set bonuses, go experience it. That's what Destiny needs right now. And that is just probably to keep Destiny barely alive. Bungie really needs to shift gears and work on the future for Destiny. All their cards right now, I think, are in Marathon. I think most of us are expecting that. But even that, if you want me to be honest, I'm not too sure what's going to happen there because I think there's a little bit of a mishap at the Bungie studio because they keep telling us that the big update for Destiny that we've been waiting on for all this news, for all these updates that we've been begging the developers for is going to happen in June. Guess what else is happening in June? The second season of Marathon. So is Bungie going to somehow miraculously change their tone and start producing content for both games simultaneously like they've told us they're not going to be able to in the past? I doubt it. I have a feeling that Bungie is going to inevitably delay what's coming in June, or what is coming in June is going to be probably glossed over and pushed to July or August. Either way, if Destiny has a hope of kind of straddling across the finish line in these next few months and just having a heartbeat, it needs to get some attention from Bungie. And if you want to be honest, if I was Sony right now, I'd be pissed at Bungie. I'd be taking some of the other studios that Sony's got under their fingers and say, hey, y'all come over here and help Bungie. You guys need to focus on Destiny, or even focus on Marathon and let Bungie focus on Destiny. Something needs to happen. Either way, I think that Sony is in a position right now where they're looking at Bungie, they're looking at Destiny, and they're saying, man, that $3 billion we gave that was a lot of money. And we're not seeming to get much return on investment. At least I don't anticipate they are, based on Destiny's numbers and Marathon's numbers. Anyway, that's my rant. That's kind of my discussion and feeling about what's been happening and my experience with D1 versus D2. I'm thinking about doing a more long form video about comparing both games, side by side comparisons over the first missions and the experience of the game. If that's something you'd be interested in, I know lots of other content creators are kind of doing that kind of long play version of the game, but I'm more kind of interested in just analyzing the game systems, the game's loot drop, the game's onboarding experience. So if you're interested in anything like that, let me know. I am going to go ahead and unlist a lot of the, or take the videos I have unlisted and put them back on the channel in case you're curious about any of those. A lot of it is content from, pre-Renegades, pre-Edge of Fate, but maybe there's a sliver of hope. Maybe if Bungie is looking for ideas and, ways to improve the game, they can look at some of these and, get back to work. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you guys are enjoying whatever you're playing out there. I'm playing a lot of Diablo. I'm looking forward to PoE here in a couple months. Destiny I pull up every couple times, once every 2 weeks. So, I wish I could say differently. But anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good one.